Hello and welcome to Talking Events, the event industry podcast brought to you by Event Industry News, being recorded today from the ticketscript offices in the heart of London's Silicon Roundabout district. A big thanks to the guys at ticketscript for hosting the Talking Events studio today to allow us to record this latest series. Today's episode, we're going to be looking at how venues are changing to attract creative events. Joining the podcast today from Central Hall, Westminster, we have Lucy Ray. Good morning, Lucy.
Morning.
And from Sadler's Wells, Kelly McGibney. Thanks for joining us, Kelly.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start by talking a little bit about your individual venues, first of all. So, Lucy, let's go with you first of all. Tell us a little bit about the venue and, in a nutshell, what it offers people.
Yeah, so we are Central London's largest conference venue. And we have a 2,400-seater auditorium along with 27 other various rooms, and we cater for all sorts of events within the area.
Excellent. Kelly, Sadler's Wells.
Sadler's Wells is actually the second oldest theatre in London, the oldest being the Old Vic. And there's been a theatre on the site since the late 1600s, and we have three theatres. The main house is 1,500 seats in Islington. We also have a 1,000-seater in Holborn, and we also have a 200-seater studio space, as well as all the front-of-house spaces as well. So people normally don't think that you could have an event in a theatre or in a front-of-house space, but they can be surprised.
So two very distinct venues,
Yes.
both in London, both offering maybe slightly different spaces, but nonetheless with the same opportunities and the same opportunities to change and develop to work with creative event organisers. Now, when we look first of all at the subject of this episode, how are venues changing and attracting creative events? Before we push record, I did say to Kelly, well, does that mean that events weren't creative before? Let's pick it up from there, because your response was great, and we'll use that as a start point for today.
Yeah, so we've always attracted a certain kind of creative industry, a lot of charities, a lot of creative sector. However, what we're seeing now is we're getting a lot of non-creative industries or non-creative subject matter, but using the space to ignite creativity within the delegates. So you get a little bit more...
It's like an interactive
Exactly.
events now. That change of conference has become quite interactive, and the use of technology within that. And I think maybe you guys are probably getting more conference sort of led things maybe that where you wouldn't have before, because it's more creative.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more of HR events where they'll incorporate a bit of a performance aspect, or they'll have. We had one event where a Shakespearean three-piece Shakespearean troupe came in and started doing bits from Julius Caesar to talk about HR issues, which I thought was pretty interesting because it doesn't end very well. So, but yeah, we're seeing a lot more, rather than kind of straight PowerPoint events, we're getting people who are using the space to not only create events from the very beginning that are more creative, but to have their delegates think a little bit more outside the box. And it does promote that kind of thinking, being in a space.
I think it's received quite well as well for the delegates that have done that conference, sit there and look at the PowerPoint, and to change that up for them, they suddenly become more interactive and more interested in the content of the conference or the event itself.
So are we being misled a little bit in the sense that it's not necessarily the really, really creative people who are becoming more creative, actually the guys who used to run the stiff conferences in the hotel conferencing suite with the rows of chairs and a screen and a PowerPoint and suits, they want a change. It's these guys who are driving this change.
Absolutely, yeah.
And how is that actually then changing the venues themselves? Because so from a venue operations point of view, what have you had to do to adapt to their needs, or what they're coming to you for? Is it the venue infrastructure that's changing? Is it using the venues to generate some of these creative ideas?
From our perspective, Sadler's Wells, it's actually using all of our strengths. So we're obviously a very theatrical venue. So when you have a conference in a theatre that can literally make it rain on stage, it's really fun because we can have not only just entrance music and corporate colors and gobos, but we can be really dramatic and really fun for an HR conference, which you normally don't necessarily get. And these guys are stage techs, for example, are mega trained, and they really love being creative. And we have several meetings with our clients, up until the day itself. And some people go with it, and some people don't. But more often than not, we have lots of follow-up meetings where people get a little bit more and more ambitious with what they want to deliver.
I think from our point of view, because we're seen as quite a traditional, it's almost the polar opposite from you guys. It's the creative use of that space within, particularly the Great Hall. It's a 21-metre high ceiling. We've been doing things with projection mapping that are, on the dome itself, which look fantastic and really draw people in. And, are working alongside our partners, White Light, who are our production partners, and they have specific texts, like you say, that, one is au fait with fashion shows. The other one will do the tech conference with the big LED screens. And I think it's just looking at the space you have and seeing the new things that you can do within that to get that creative new aspect to that event.
When we're talking about the you mentioned gobos and some of the actual production elements of an event, is there a trend from these non-creative industries to search for venues that are not necessarily blank canvas, where they've then got to bring all of their own production in? Is there a trend towards finding venues that have a lot of that in-house or available in-house to alleviate that little bit of pressure from them?
Absolutely, yeah. They love the one-stop shop aspect of the venue, and certainly from our perspective, we have one person who takes care of the client from initial sales to the delivery of the event. So even though we have 20 different people in various departments working on the event, they only have one point of contact, and they really appreciate that, because it can be quite daunting when you have so much available, and you need to sift through and say, well, actually that's too expensive, or you really don't need that, or we really encourage you to have this. Lights, for example, are one of the cheapest ways to make your event look really, really special, and we can do all of that in house, which is really good.
Yeah, and it's like what you're saying, it's that all under one roof. And with our partners based in building, I mean, from our venue point of view, it's pretty much got that creative wow factor from the outset. We're the second highest self-supporting dome in the world, and it's that kind of look and feel of grandeur. And when you go in, the staircase, that leads off, and the reception area. So I think for us, they see that's already got that character inbuilt in the venue, as it were. And then, like you say, the people that really know that venue well will take that and work with them to create an event for them, to nurture them, to say, what are your ideas, and we will come back and feed back to say, well, how about using the space differently, like this, reversing, say, the projection and the audience, and because you have that space to be able to change it up for them.
How does it affect both of you, being what I suppose are historic old venues, aren't they? They're old buildings, and I would guess they're both listed in some way, shape or form. How does it affect you in terms of being able to develop the internal infrastructure, to be able to develop certain aspects of the building itself, whilst working with ultimately what is quite an old-fashioned building?
I think for us, we can't do much structurally because we are Grade 2 listed, and it's beautiful. We don't want to do much structurally. So again, it's about the additions to that, putting in the screen that fits and the creative lighting that goes with it. Just that use of space for us. And, the character behind it, the delegates don't want it changed, which is lucky for us because we can't, but it's that backdrop already there for them.
Yeah, very much the same. It's we have the actual well from the late 1600s that you can go and see, so everybody loves to see it. It's essentially
it's
a whole
talking point.
It is a talking
it's
point.
Nice to have those about your venue. I think that talking point.
Yeah, everybody wants to have a backstage tour. Everybody wants to
absolutely.
see, be on the stage, and so we really don't need to change the structure of the building that much to make it. It's quite versatile. There's a lot of, even though there's been a theatre on the site since, like I said, the late 1600s. The front of house spaces are actually really innovative, and we have a lot of collapsible walls. We have a lot of different ways of changing the structure of the space, and we have a lot of different examples of how clients in the past have done that, which is really useful. So
you can go back to that, can't you, as reference?
Exactly. It
feeds into the client's imagination.
Well, why don't we reference some of those? Give us some examples of some of the ways that the venues have been used in those creative ways and how they've adapted them. Are there any off the top of your head that you can think of that we can highlight to people?
Absolutely. So we have a repeat client that's coming in later in the month, and it's Council for Disabled Children. So they had before, and they're repeating again, a mezzanine level front of house reception, which means all of our walls are then taken away.
Oh, wow.
And there's really beautiful lighting, and we have bowl food and canapé, and it's for a completely different audience than we would normally have than, for example, our flamenco festival that's coming up. And we have people coming in for ham and bread and their own wine and everything, and that's lovely. And then we had a No Ordinary Wedding come in and do a wedding fair on the mezzanine level. So again, exhibition tables, and we had people showing examples of first dances that you could do.
Fantastic.
So we had everything from hip hop to tango in the space. So everybody just uses it for their own purpose, and it's really nice to see how versatile it is.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, we do a lot of work with the BBC, I think, for location and wise and things like that. And one of the BBC used the Great Hall for the live election debates, one of them that was there, and they totally flipped the room round. So the stage is very much the focal point of the room with the organ, and it has stage seating there. But instead of using that for the speakers to stand on, they created a stage within the room on the floor and sat the audience on the stage, which was tiered, and it worked really well and looked fantastic on camera, and they had this beautiful backdrop of the whole of Westminster, which looked great, and great lighting to go with it. And then we had Channel 4 event, which was the telethon for Stand Up for Cancer. And they literally, again, you can't physically change our building, but they created 3 different studios within this one space, so they could flip from one scene to another and it would look completely different, and then still have a 2,000 people audience within that. So, it's fantastic, isn't it, to see the end result for all the planning, to then see the creativity behind it.
You just reminded me, we had the BBC in for Young Dancer of the Year, and they completely changed the seating in the main house, where they had judges tables. They also had an interview station that was by where our sound desk normally is, but they just removed all these seats, and it looked like a completely different area.
Building a room within a room,
isn't it? It was so clever, yeah.
We had another one was Anya Hindmarsh, who big fashion designer handbags. They did a catwalk show with us for one of the London Fashion Weeks, and they built sort of a square cube almost within the room, and they suspended dance models and the handbags going down the runway, and then built tiered seating around it. And it was, that was built within the room. So once you went into that cube, you again were not in the Great Hall, and it just transformed it.
We talk about the venues. You've both said quite clearly that there's very little people can do in terms of changing the building, but ultimately they wouldn't come to your types of venue anyway if they wanted to change any aspect of it. They're coming to it because of their character and because of the nature of what the buildings are fundamentally. Is something like dry hire therefore sort of very much a thing of the past? Is it much more of a consultative approach to venue hire and event organisation now, where you have venues with their own in-house consultants helping perhaps design agencies who are helping with these creative elements of it and working with the organiser as well? Is it more of a consultative approach rather than just phone rings, yes, we'd like to book the venue on this day, thank you very much?
I think Kelly mentioned it with that one-stop shop. It's nice to have that, and I think the clients like that. They can come in for that meeting or that show round and have a member of the production, have a member of the catering, the event manager that will look after that on the day, and I think that gives some real reassurance that anything is possible there, and we have the means to do it. I don't know, from your point of view.
I mean, don't get me wrong, we get plenty of workshops that they make the initial booking and then they just come up on the day, and it is pretty much a straight
sure.
We have Cancer Research just around the corner, and we have a really great relationship with them and CRI as well. But when we do have those slightly more special, the Health Foundation came for a screening. They just had a series of videos shot, and they wanted to have a really special kind of old-fashioned Hollywood type of premiere. So we put them in touch with the supplier of the popcorn machine, and we put them in touch with the supplier for the furniture house. So while we weren't necessarily making all of their decisions,
it's nice to be able to give that offer to them.
Absolutely, and people that we can thoroughly recommend, and offer them a little bit more advice than they maybe would have had on their own.
Having to go away and research it themselves, which can often be real time consuming if they've got to organise various offices across the country or even the world, you know, to be able to have us there to suggest that rather than them sit there and have to research it, I think they really buy into.
Not all of the guys listening to this episode, if they are venue operators themselves, they won't all have the luxury, I suppose, of having a beautiful central London venue, but can they still take the same similar aspects out of this? Should they be staying one step ahead of the organisers coming to them? Should they be constantly looking at the ideas like having suppliers of a popcorn machine or making sure that they've got a portfolio of contractors available to be able to present them?
Yeah, keeping that solid base of suppliers that you know you can contact. You know, we all have it last minute events where, you know, you've got those suppliers that are willing to accommodate that, and, you know, keeping in touch with them, seeing what things they're doing new. You know, we often, with our production partners, we want to go to their vast warehouse that's hanger size to see the new technology they're working with, because it's that next step for us to look at what the client might want next, or we can offer to give them a taste of what's coming next.
I also think knowing your venue inside and out and knowing all of its attributes is really, really vital.
Capabilities,
Yeah, absolutely, because you may not think that this particular aspect is special or would be useful, but being able to make those connections and guide the client in the best way possible, you really don't need to have that much outside of your venue if you know it that well, and, you know, they have confidence in you.
And understanding the limitations, you know, every venue will have a limitation, and understanding that before that's picked up by the client to offer an alternative, so they don't even see that that's a limitation.
Managing expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, managing expectations is something that creeps into every aspect.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Regardless of, it doesn't have to be the event industry, that's any business, isn't it? Managing expectations. So.
But this is quite an emotional industry, I think, as well.
Yeah.
People really have a lot hanging on, and
they invest a lot of their time and effort and thought into it.
And sometimes these are like a year, 2 years in the making, and people have so much invested. And to be able to creatively suggest alternatives while not dashing hopes is so important.
And how have budgets changed? I know it's a brutal thing to mention, but fundamentally, every event is going to be driven by the budget that it has. How easy or difficult is it to work within the confines of a budget in your own venues? And how difficult do you think it is as an industry to work with these people who are coming brilliantly with more creative ideas, but actually being able to fulfill some of that creativity within the budgets that they've got?
I mean, I think budgets have come back certainly from what they were, you know, when we had the economic crash generally, which is nice. So they do have a little bit more of a budget to spend, but they do want that bit more for it. I mean, we all want everything for the budget, but to be able to say, well, you can have this, but this also works. You know, you don't have to have, you know, the super duper all singing or dancing to create a really good event, and to create the visual effect, or, you know, that feeling within the event within, you know, tight budget, because we do have different, like you said, the charities will come and they still want a great event, but they're very much limited to what they can spend on. So it's, as we say, knowing what the limitations are and what their limitations are with their budget, and be able to offer within that.
What we found most recently actually is a lot with agencies. They keep on saying, so what else could you do? What's the plus one of this? You know, what else could you offer? And it's always perceived value.
Throw this
in. It's not necessarily how much is it worth, but how much would it be perceived to be worth to the client. And I think that's really important, especially, you know, we charge, say, for example, tech time. That's not necessarily, you know, what BEC2, which is the industry union charges, but we were able to make, you know, certain allowances. We're able to negotiate within Sadler's Wells, which is really nice, having all those different departments and you know, kind of
to speak to them and say, guys, if we're going to budge slightly, can you guys budge slightly? And it's that partnership within the venue to fit the client budget at the end of the day.
The flip side to all of this, of course, from where I see it, is going right back to the beginning of the conversation and engaging with what traditionally were non-creative industries who are now coming to your venues to be a bit more creative, is that perhaps they think that a lot of these elements are going to cost more than they actually do cost now, because
Yeah.
the reality is that the cost of screens, for example, and big screens and LED screens and stuff has come down dramatically, hasn't it, in the last 4 or 5
Absolutely,
years?
yeah.
So it's actually more accessible than some people may realise.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And we get people who are constantly surprised at what they can achieve with actually not much more than what they
Yeah.
would just in, a hotel room, for example.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is." What did we have? We had Sport England in the other day, and we overheard someone say, "It's so nice not being in a sporting venue."
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that difference.
So good, and they're all sports people, but being in a theater really helped ignite some more thinking that maybe they wouldn't have had
we
before.
get that in the hotel aspect. A lot
Yeah.
of the conferences would have been in the standard hotel setting, which is great. That's but we're not that.
Yeah.
And it's being able to come in, in the hotel. It's very much the AV is probably set on, it's inbuilt in the room, whereas our guys come in and build that set for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's almost their piece of they've created that. It's their creation rather than them walking in and that's there for them.
Everything's custom made.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's they can put their own designs, their own logos in, and add their own technology, their own Q&A sessions within that technology. Slido, for example, is something we've used quite a lot recently, and that technology is not that expensive for what it does, and it enables a 2,000 audience to engage with that speaker where necessarily they wouldn't stand up and grab the microphone. They can do it by their phones, and that comes up on this big screen, and their question will be answered, and that isn't that expensive for the client to be able to do. So again, that's looking at budgets and be able to fit everything the client wants within that.
So you guys very much, it's not just the actual the physical services that you're aware of as well, but you are keeping an eye on things like apps and the things that people can, organisers can use and delegates can use and visitors can use to keep interacting with events.
The increase in technology in the past couple of years has been really
crazy.
interesting.
Yeah,
and people expect that. Wi-Fi is not,
it's exciting,
for example,
people, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interaction, and it's the whole way that kind of society's going anyway. Twitter used to be like, oh, what is this? But if you don't have it, you don't have a handle, then who are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we definitely need to keep on top of what's available now. But as we were saying before, what's happening in the future, and being able to offer those options, because that is part of the service as well.
You mentioned the W word, Wi-Fi. How have you both adapted the venues? Because ultimately it's a huge element, isn't it, now, of any event, regardless of the nature of the industry that event is serving. There has to be connectivity. There has to be good connectivity. Now, how have you both, how have the respective venues developed over the last few years to offer that?
Well, we've got a designated IT team that's run by a great head of IT now, head of technology, Kim Wright, and she's got a team that is dedicated in that building to ensure that everyone has connectivity, because God forbid that goes down and you get the organizer, but we can also segregate it within the building, have secure networks, which particularly for us in where we are in Westminster and some of the government bodies that come in, that's hugely important to them. So we've invested a lot of time with the IT guys to ensure that different areas can be secluded from each other, but also just ensuring that it's a strong network that people can access easily and quickly.
Being a public venue, we have a public Wi-Fi that we always want people to be checking in. We want people, it's just advertising for the venue, frankly. But we have a private events Wi-Fi, we have a staff Wi-Fi, we have a tech Wi-Fi. We have so many different Wi-Fis, and it's essential that they're up. It's no longer an option. It has to be available.
It's expected.
Because it's not just for people's day-to-day needs to access get online either, is it? I mean, with some of these, again, going back to non-creative industries, you could be hosting an industry event for an industry that requires high bandwidth or requires to stream stuff in from their own servers or whatever it may be.
Well, for example, we have on the 1st of March we have Change Board, which is they're doing an HR conference, and one of the aspects of the conference is they're having a rolling Twitter wall that's
yeah,
going.
we've had that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Twitter
great.
screen. So and everybody's interacting. Obviously, there's a delay because everyone just wants to see something naughty every once in a while that you have to
You
account
have to have
for.
that person that's checking everything.
Yeah, you have to have the
Absolutely.
administrator.
Yeah, oh,
don't you,
absolutely.
Oh my goodness, yes. And so yeah, because we're going to have 800 members, you know, who are going to be tweeting and going to be interacting, then yeah, our Wi-Fi has to be up to scratch. There's no question about it.
And we had Le Web, that's a massive tech conference. And to look at our venue, you wouldn't associate a technology conference and them talking about what's coming in the future. So for us, it's key that all these services are on point, and because we have a venue full of tech wizards that, God forbid anything does go, they're going to pick that up in an instant
And run with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's just staying on top of it constantly to make sure that it's all up and running.
Have you got to be careful in striking a balance when you meet an organiser, a potential client for the first time, in understanding very, very quickly where, and I mean this with the greatest respect, where their level is in terms of understanding things like connectivity, like Twitter walls, so that you're not bombarding them with loads of stuff that they think, hold on, I just don't understand this.
I think that comes from ourselves, isn't it? And that initial conversation, maybe researching them, what they do in their companies, and you know, seeing what level of sort of AV they require, and you can often gauge it from there. But also taking along various people from various departments, just in case that question comes up. And I'm not tech savvy, but you know, I can answer a few questions. But having those people there ready.
I think also I come from a theatrical background myself, and so when I start saying things like gobos, for example, I have to remember that somebody who works in insurance may not know what a gobo is, and so I have to do a lot of translation. But I feel like if I could bring the message across, then
in simple terms,
I am the layman. Exactly.
Absolutely.
So if I can translate the IT or the tech speak for the client, then we can.
And they feel reassured then that someone that isn't a tech, you know, dedicated person can explain that piece of technology to someone who had, like you say, no idea as to what that was in the beginning.
And even being able to explain what it does, inevitably though there'll still be the question of, well, what will it do for me? What will it actually do for my event? And how important is it then to have good examples and a good understanding and the ability to reference quickly and simply what benefit that can actually bring.
Visuals are so important for that.
Absolutely.
And then also for me, knowing one thing that I had to learn was that not everybody knows what I think they know. And that sounds so simple, but it's not at all. So assuming that people know certain things is like the worst that you could do.
I don't think people mind you telling them something they know. I think that also instills confidence that, they know what I'm talking about.
And just literally having to explain how light works and physics.
Yeah, and for us, we have a YouTube channel, so that's great to reference that for them to go and have a look for yourself when I'm not here, and you don't think that I'm just filling you with a load of sales speak. They can actually go away and look at that and investigate it.
Well, I'm going to ask how important it is from. You mentioned visuals, and I've been onto a number of venue websites, 2 or 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, where I know for a fact I'm looking at pictures of an event that took place 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. They don't have a gallery of up-to-date images. They don't. It's okay having archived pictures of events on there, but people really want to see as many different examples of many different events and how they've done it for inspiration, don't they? So how much importance is there placed internally on making sure that you're capturing visually and through things like video the types of events that are going on there and being able to translate that?
I think that's key, and liaising with that client to know how much we can use after, from that PR and marketing perspective. And I mean, for us, we do have some good examples that are live on TV that we can reference, but also just some of the simple stage sets that are really, really good, but, are a company that you wouldn't necessarily think that would allow you to use those images. And, and staying in touch with that organizer and saying, look, guys, it was a great set, we really like it, do you mind? And 9 times out of 10 they will say, yeah, that's fine, as long as there's no important content that was on the screen. But I think it's important to keep in touch with those as you go along.
For our events team, it's sometimes difficult, I'll be honest, because we're very small. We're only about 4 people, and we're both sales and events and operations. So we do it all, and so we try to keep up an Instagram account. We try to keep up our own Twitter account. It's very separate to the Sadler's Wells Theatre account, and so we do know we need to have more up-to-date examples, but the examples we do have are really striking, to be honest. So maybe we can be a little bit lazy, to be honest, for not updating as much as we should. But what we can offer, what we do is we have a lot of live examples. So we have not a lot of time in the main theatre, for example, because we're obviously a working theatre and there's rehearsals and dancers, and that's part of the fun, to be honest. But what we can do is we can have half an hour with our head of tech, and he can show you something absolutely spectacular, but like, oh, right, that's what it is. And because everything is unique, it is nice to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us as well, we like to get the visuals of the beginning of the set builds a lot of the time. Sometimes ours will take a week to build. So having that gradual step so that the client can see, oh wow, that creates that, from start to finish of that sort of skeleton, as it were, to the end result. And I think they really appreciate that wow, that's been created.
We're running out of time quickly, but there is something that I want to ask for, just before we wrap up, and that's the content that's actually available on your websites, on a venue's website. And again, going back to not just pictures, but technical information, downloadable documents that give them things like what power there is, what the Wi-Fi is, all of this sort of technical information. Again, this seems to be a little bit hit and miss with venues as to what level of information is accessible. How much are you driven by what clients have said to you that they could or couldn't find via the website in order to then adapt and develop that?
Yeah, I think for us, we've done a lot of work, and that's our head of marketing, Maria Schurtz, that has done massive amounts of work on that. We need to sort of stand out within Westminster. There are so many beautiful venues in that area, so for us to really come to the forefront of that and be able to offer everything, and for people to go onto that website and, like you say, not have to make the phone call, can just grab that information, so they're already armed with it, to then come and say, right, I know you guys do this, I know I want to put on this. And I think for us, obviously I'm biased, it's my venue, but it's a good factual website. It gives history of the venue, it gives example of events done, it gives our capabilities, our capacities in terms of, the capabilities in terms of tech, our catering offer. It's there, and it's clear, and there is downloadable that they can, take away with them to have a look at. So
yeah, it's same with us. Bearing in mind the user's journey is so important, because 9 times out of 10 people who come to Sadler's Wells website, they're coming for show information.
Right.
They're not necessarily, most people still don't even know that we do events, which is amazing. And so when you do go into the event part of the website, then that's our realm, and we try to make it just as straightforward as possible. There are downloadables of all of the tech spec of all of the theaters, and to be completely honest, I don't understand all of them. They're very technical, but that's because we have a lot of companies who put on shows, for example, and they know. And we just had a multi-million-pound refurb a couple of years ago, and all of our tech in the main house had been updated, and it was really nice to have that new information in, and it means so much to a certain kind of client. But for conference clients, you just need to sift it out a little bit and translate it and say, I know this looks like a lot of light information, but this is what it can do for you, and to show them what it can be. Visuals,
like you say, some people don't want to be bombarded with written down information. We did a Meet the Future, which was a huge success for us, and is nominated at Event Live Awards, and that gives you an idea of what can be done within that space from our own conference that we produced, and it answers a lot of questions, visually for them.
And ultimately, the more information you can give somebody from minute one, the more detailed brief they can give you, which helps you to then deliver the event that they want, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes people have no idea what kind of event they want, and that's fair enough, and they need you to guide them.
They'll pick things, won't they? I want that from, say, Meet the Future. I want that from the BBC debate, and then it's putting that together to create a bespoke event for them within your space.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, sometimes they'll see something on stage that is from a German company that that was just coming through, and that's actually not our technology. So again, it's the managing the expectations and seeing exactly what they want to achieve, not how they achieve it. Do you get what I mean?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Guys, we're going to wrap it up there. What we'll do is when this particular episode goes out, we will tweet links to both the venues, so that if anybody listening to this has got any questions, anything they'd like to contact you about directly, they can get in touch via your Twitter handles. You can listen to the Talking Events podcast by subscribing via iTunes. You can also watch it on the Event Industry News website. You can also subscribe to the Event Industry News YouTube channel. It leaves me to say thank you to today's guests, Lucy Ray from Central Hall, Westminster. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Kelly McGibney from Sadler Wells. Thank you for
you.
joining us. You've been listening to Talking Events.